The more I watch the Packers, the more I understand how they want to attack the Seahawks. You're going to see that motion. You're going to see some deep throws down the field. What part of the Packers game concerns you the most? And then what part of the game do you think the Hawks can take advantage of?
Yeah, I mean, I think their big thing is they've run the football at a higher rate than any team in the NFL this year. And so that's what they want to do on early downs especially, and they're very good at it. So I know Mike Macdonald has talked a bunch about, stopping the run while having light boxes, while still playing your safeties deep. And so I think that's going to be a big deal in this game. Are the Seahawks able to do that? Because that's what the Packers want to do. And then, as you mentioned, they want to take their shots downfield. So early downs, can the Seahawks stop the run? I think that might go a long way in determining this football game.
This one's fascinating because I think if you're someone who hasn't paid much attention to the Seahawks for, the last 4 or 5 weeks, you look at it and you go, oh my God, the Packers should absolutely win. The Packers have just been a little more consistent as a team this year. And yet the Seahawks defensively over the last 5 weeks have been outstanding, limiting opponents to under 20 points per game, limiting, rushing games to, under 100 per game. So how do you see the matchup now, knowing what we've seen from Seattle's defense?
Yeah, I think it's I honestly think these are two of the best schemers in the NFL, Mike Macdonald defensively and Matt LaFleur offensively. So I'm with you on the Seahawks defense. I mean, that performance last week when you're able to scheme up those interceptions against Kyler Murray early in that game, I mean, it just looks to me like a defense that's coming together at the right time, that's getting healthy at the right time. And we saw this with Macdonald in Baltimore, where, early on there were some bumps in the road, and then the players started to get his scheme a little bit, and all of a sudden they looked like one of the best defenses in the league. So this is a big test for the Seahawks. There's no doubt about it. This is a Packers team with plenty to play for, with a quarterback who I like a lot, even though the numbers might not be, what some people expected going into the season. Jordan Love can make the high-level throws where, hey, your coverage is really good and it doesn't matter. He's going to be aggressive and try to fit it into a tight window anyway. So, yeah, these are two units that are playing really, really well, and I think it's a bit of a measuring stick game for the Seahawks. I think they've overachieved. They're obviously in place to win the NFC West right now. The final month of the season, it's not the easiest schedule the last 4 weeks. So now we get a look at, well, are they just sort of like a good, solid team that's competing for a playoff spot, or is there a higher ceiling for them?
Yeah, the next 4 weeks are going to be crucial, especially these next two. Going into this stretch, Stacy and I have kind of leaned on, look, if you can win one of these next 2 games, you're going to have a chance, obviously, with some help by the Niners. That would be great. You mentioned that this is a measuring stick for them. Is there a way that they can lose this game where Seahawks fans should feel good about their team, or is it all about just a win and a loss?
No, I'm with you. I think you got you want to win one of the next 2. I honestly think this is probably going to come down to a Sunday night game in Week 18, one of those de facto playoff games. It very well could be them and the Rams in Week 18 for a shot to get into the playoffs. So I think you want to win one of the next 2. Obviously, you want to win the game because every win matters. But if they're competitive in this game, if it sort of comes down to something fluky at the end, if it's a field goal game, I still think you feel pretty good about the Seahawks, and specifically defensively. I think if they can hold up against this Packers offense, that will be another encouraging sign that, hey, what we've seen over the last month, that's not fluky. That's just who this team is right now.
Hey, Sheil, Bump and I yesterday were talking about Coach of the Year, and both of us looked at Kevin O'Connell, and we had Dan Campbell as our kind of runner-up. But there's lots of great candidates. Mike Tomlin in that conversation. Mike Macdonald's not going to find himself in the conversation, but we think he's done a great job when you look at what they've been able to do defensively with this turnaround. How would you summarize, or what would you make of the job he's done this year in his first year as head coach?
Yeah, I think he's done a really good job. I mean, you just look at what they did with kind of changing your linebackers in the middle of a season. Usually that's a sign of desperation for a team. It usually doesn't work out. It's like, all right, they're grasping for straws here. They don't like the guys they have there. They make that change, and all of a sudden those guys have kind of keyed this defensive resurgence. So that, to me, is a sign of good coaching, where you say, all right, we made some moves in the offseason. We thought these linebackers, Tyrell Dodson, we thought they were going to be good players for us. It didn't work out. Let's make a change, and let's see how it works out. And it did work out. And you can point to some of that on the offensive line as well, where, you have turnover in November and December where you're switching pieces on the offensive line and it actually leads to an improvement, that tells me that the coaches kind of know what they're doing and they're able to implement those pieces and adjust to some of those moving parts. So, yeah, I think, honestly, regardless of if they make the playoffs or not, and obviously if you're a Seahawks fan, obviously you want them to make the playoffs. I still think the signs have been very encouraging for Mike Macdonald's first season.
Yeah, it has been. Watching him go through the ups and the downs of the season, I think shows just real character and real grit. And I feel like the defense is starting to show that character and grit. When he was with Baltimore, it took him a few weeks to get things going. When you look at the personnel of the Seahawks defense, obviously it's not going to be equivalent to what was in Baltimore. But what are some of the similarities, and where do you think they can still improve?
Yeah, I just look at a guy like Leonard Williams, who's having one of the best seasons for any defensive tackle in the NFL. And I think in the past he's been a good player, a very good player. He's obviously earned a lot of money, but I don't think he's played at this level consistently. And so that's where I look at the coaching. You look at the Ravens last year, they had a defensive tackle, Justin Matabuke, who had a career season, and he got paid like over $23 million per year after playing in this scheme with Mike Macdonald. So it's stuff like that. It's figuring out how did the pieces fit? How do you get Reek Woolen to kind of bounce back from last year? How do you use Devin Witherspoon? How do you generate a pass rush without maybe, the most talented edge rushers in the NFL, and also without having to blitz? How do you scheme stuff up? Things like that. So those are some of the things you saw Macdonald have to do in Baltimore, and I think those are some of the things you're seeing him do in Seattle.